More of Jung and HARP. Today we're talking about taking out the garbage. My name is Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and a performer, and I'm here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. And every week we look at something we want to look at in our lives, and often something that I've written a song about, so that we can, Kathleen can almost like take that song apart, like analyzing a dream, but also that we can look at the parts of our lives that are kind of coming up. Well, how would you say this, Kathleen? How would you say what we do?
Well, I think we take a look at how our larger self, the greatness of who we are shows up in the world and how it shows up in our works of art, in our music, in our interactions, all with an eye towards how we can live more fully and be more wholly the authentic self we are.
I love that. And I'm also thinking of how it shows up to me, like how I
Hmm.
get to see myself, what part of me shows me me. So today, and we also love it when there are people on the chat and we can see the chat. We've got that finally worked out logistically, so that you're part of this as well. So today, we're talking about. Kathleen asked me to talk about a song called "My Garbage Man," and so Kathleen, do you want to say anything about that and why you chose that? And then I'm just going to sing it a cappella because that is how it came into my life.
Oh. Yeah, I love this song. And about a month and a half ago, I was up early one morning out on my upper deck meditating, and our garbage trucks happened to come very early in the morning. And I heard the garbage truck coming down the street. And all of a sudden, your song, I Love My Garbage Man, came into my mind. It was like that earworm all day long. And I know a little bit about your story about it, and I think that state of gratitude in our life where we can stay open hearted is part of the key to staying alive while we're still in our body. So many people are walking the procession of the living dead. Their bodies are up and moving, but they've lost that connection to the essence of the moment. And your song, I Love My Garbage Man, so encapsulates that essence of the aliveness, and the essence as it was flowing in that moment. And that's the stuff of life.
Well, I also love what you said about it, and I'll start singing it in a minute. It's just people can hear the words. But one of the things that you said about it that is okay. So let me just say, this song happened right around this time of year, when the American Thanksgiving was about to happen. And I'm not actually gonna. I'll actually stay on the screen with you because I think it would be
Okay.
kind of fun to do this in an interactive way.
Okay.
When somebody asked, I don't remember, somebody asked me a question or something, and I thought, well, what am I truly thankful for? That question. I asked myself that question, and suddenly, um, my garbage man. And this song popped into my head. Oh, the garbage man is the man for me, 'cause he takes my trash and he leaves me free, and I don't know just where I'd be without my garbage man. Bum, 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 bum. And I was just about heading out for a run, so I just like that was just fun. That was it. That was the whole song. And I just thought about it. And then I was in my car a few days later, or maybe later that day, and I was stuck behind the garbage man. And and so the next verse came to me, and I wrote it out on a plastic, not on a plastic, on a bag that was in my car. Oh, he has a big truck and it gets in the way. I'm stuck behind it on garbage day. I don't mind that slight delay. I love my garbage man. I love my garbage man. I love my garbage man. Bum, 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 bum. And then songs, often have sort of a secondary theme. And I'm always embarrassed because I keep plastic bags, and it's not that I want to reuse them. I mean, I do reuse them. I don't like what happens to them. I don't feel confident about what happens to them. Now, I grew up in an environment with grandparents who'd been through the Great Depression, and we didn't use paper towels, there were a lot of things that, and they lived in a society that was kind of, circular. So your garbage was in your face. It's not like it well, it just goes away out in whatever. So, so this idea of where my garbage goes and that someday I'm going to have to deal with it. It's going to come back to me, or somebody else is going to have to deal with it. A dolphin is going to have to deal with it, or a whale is going to have to deal with it. It doesn't just disappear. So I then came this verse. Oh, I have nightmares that every plastic stack I ever threw away comes marching back. I'm suffocating in a plastic sea. Where's my garbage man? So there, and it was humorous, but it's really true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was that verse. And then I think I saw that there was a woman garbage man that came to my house. And to me, it's still garbage. This is just my thing. Gender's always been kind of confusing to me and whatever. Don't like being called ma'am, do like being called sir. Who that's a whole other thing. But then the verse came. Oh, a girl can be a garbage man. She can pick up the trash like the other guys can. She would be my greatest pal. I'd love my garbage gal. I'd love my garbage gal. So I just had a lot of fun writing and singing this song and enjoying this song. And then when I made my big project for symphony orchestra, I created it for symphony orchestra, and I created it as the encore. And I had loved, and I made it with the garbage men would come out in the middle of the show and they would play the garbage cans, and it just became, then it went to the point of ridiculous, which was wonderful. So that it became this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful piece with people, thousands of people in the audience singing, "I love my garbage man." And, but this relationship is very important to me. Like, I love it when I can actually be present when my garbage man comes, and I can like literally give him the sack, and I can say thank you. And because, okay, so that's my part of the story. You started talking about it in a really beautiful way before we began. You started talking about our personal garbage.
Yeah, I love the song, and I was jotting down some of the words because part of what we do in Jungian psychology is we look at stories as metaphor for processes in our own psyche. So one of the things I was saying to you before we started on air was, we all need an inner garbage man. We need someone who comes and takes the emotional trash, the mental trash, the energetic trash, and disposes of it in a way that does not hurt us or those around us. And this beautiful line, I can't help but think about, man, people not dealing with their emotional garbage. If we don't deal with it, someone has to. So like when you said you're drowning and suffocating in the sea of plastic, well, what we know now from environmentalists is a lot of our sea creatures, like dolphins, are getting caught and suffocating in the sea of plastic.
Right.
And that if we don't take responsibility for disposing of literal garbage in ways that won't hurt someone else, someone will suffer. The same is true for us emotionally. And when I think about emotional garbage, I think about self-hate. One of the books I often recommend is by Theodore Rubin, and it's entitled Compassion and Self-Hate. If you're listening and you don't have a copy, order it today. Everyone comes back to me and says, wow, that's a hard read. Because when they start reading about self-hate, they realize how insidious it is, and how all of these constructive criticisms we give ourselves and all of the ways we constantly lift ourselves forward toward our goals and we push ourselves beyond our limits are agents of self-hate. And that's the kind of garbage that if we don't take responsibility for it and clean it up in our life, then we share it with other people. Because how we treat ourselves is how we treat other people. Yeah.
Right. And we got this beautiful, my therapist is my garbage gal. I love it. I'm so grateful for her. Right. I mean, this is, and I'm aware that the garbage person doesn't, it doesn't really solve the problem. I mean, it, it helps me. And, wait a minute. So we're getting a really nice, would you please repeat, the name of the book? Oh, could you please repeat the name of the book, Kathleen?
Yeah, it's Compassion and Self-Hate by Theodore Rubin. It's an old book, but it has been republished and it's well worth having. Yeah.
It's, so, I mean, I'm aware that, this, I have a relationship, with my garbage men. I mean, I love them. I love that they come. I love the truck. I love that it's big and that it makes noise and stuff like that. I mean, I still love that. And I'm aware that we together have a bigger issue, because we can't just, like you said, we can't, like, I can't just take my garbage and throw it out into the world. Um, it needs to, my personal garbage needs to be well, we talked about the different things. You can recycle it, you can get rid of it, you can also resource it, or and of course this isn't true for everything, but I'm just thinking about my personal, just stuff in my house. And I think I'm going off on a tangent here. You might want to pull me back. Let's let's talk about, okay, you talked about our personal, so let's talk about, for example, what it means. Like, I get takeout. I could make the stuff that's in the takeout, but I could not make that plastic container. And yet I throw away the plastic container. And this is just a whole other thing. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't even know what to do about that. I don't even know how to be responsible. On the one hand, I really want to support the businesses in my neighborhood. That's part of me having a rich and healthy neighborhood. And on the other hand, how can I support, but this gets into sort of technical things. Let's just talk about it even from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, so I think you just brought us back to something that we have to remember, is that change starts with the individual. I think it was Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world. So if, for instance, we're going to talk for a minute about literal physical garbage,
Right.
then if I'm concerned about plastic, then I have to take my own bags, reusable bags, to the grocery store and decline the plastic bag. Or when I go to pick up my takeout, I have to begin to look at and make mental notes of what are the places that will use cardboard containers that will recycle versus plastic that won't. And those are the ones that come up on my list for supporting. Or again, we go to pick up the takeout and we say, I don't want your plastic bag. I brought my own bag to put it in. So we have to begin to do what we can do individually. The same is true for us emotionally. I can try to talk my husband out of his criticism and self-hate when he gets in it, but if I'm not dealing with my own, I'm probably going to come across as judgmental, and you shouldn't be saying that, because I still have that energy in me, and I realize that what's needed more than anything is the compassion. And that's Rubin's principle. Once you get through the self-hate, he talks about how do we cultivate compassion. So I think some of it is looking at the compassion is, what's the next step I can take? And how do we repurpose things? I mean, some people would never put a plastic bag from the grocery store in their trash can. Instead, they buy these pretty little clear plastic ones because it looks better, or it looks more sophisticated or more elegant. But what are we doing there about image? I mean, it's so I think we have to all look at what we can do differently and that one next step we can take. And then if we are in positions, we all are in positions to influence corporate decisions based on our buying.
It's interesting, because I'm thinking, okay, what are we experts at and what are we not experts at? Like, I'm not expert at this field, and yet there are people who are experts at it. And I'm thinking, where I'm thinking like, how can I take this into the world of art? How can I take, for
Mhm.
example, and how can we also look at the other side of the song? Because this is coming up. The other side of the song is the gratefulness, is
Mhm.
the experience of gratefulness, and sometimes the experience of gratefulness for something, uh, for the release of, okay, so the allowing of release of things, the gratefulness of that which takes them away. I don't know, there's so many things here, and yet how often we think it's icky, like, we see, and
Right.
like if an animal dies and then other animals come and eat it, we're like, ooh. But like, this is part of the rejuvenation process,
Right.
and when we make a mistake, it's like, oh, I made a mistake, versus, okay, this is part of the process, then we let that go, we let that out, or we look at it, maybe it can be turned into something else, maybe we can allow it to get turned into something else.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about composting, and
Mhm,
something that I read a while back, which came back into my mind this week as I was listening about the climate change summit
mhm.
and their emphasis has to go around on methane. I read once from an organic gardening newsletter I received that broccoli in the compost bin becomes good fertilizer, but broccoli in the landfill becomes methane.
Mm.
And that stuck
Aha.
with me, that we can take the same item and putting it in different places, it has a different effect. If I take the broccoli and put it in my compost earth bin, it becomes something that's helpful and that's in line with natural order. If it goes to the landfill mixed in with everything else, it becomes something toxic. So part of it is really looking at where does this, what is the natural place this can flow to, and it becomes something that will be helpful.
I think this is
Yeah.
really interesting what you're saying, and Andrew's saying perhaps we are everyone's garbage gals when we forgive. That
Mm.
I'm thinking, we can resent something, or we can engage with it and forgive. We can open up. We can have a conversation about it. And it sounds like that's kind of what I'm hearing. That when you are putting things, whether it's broccoli or whether it's, some concern about yourself, into a situation in which it cannot transform
Right.
effectively into its next best
Right.
and most conducive connective thing, then we're denying ourselves, and we're denying that, and we are not connected into you know with that thing. I mean, I don't, I'm
No,
just
no,
saying that because
I
I'm no
think you're
expert on that.
but I think this is important because one of the things Jung said about our psyche is that there is a natural gradient that our libido will follow if left unobstructed. But when it gets blocked and it starts to come back in on us, it will create unnatural things, neuroses, perversions, all of those things that we suffer from emotionally, because the energy, instead of flowing in its right order, it turns inward. So the same thing with the garbage bag that ends up in the ocean.
Okay, so here's a big question.
Okay.
How do you know the difference between a neurosis and an artistic proclivity? Or, what is this a social, and by the way, I just want to be clear that this conversation is not about us. I mean, it's about us sharing our exploration. That's where we first met, was in the
Yeah.
exploration of ideas, not sitting here and saying, oh, I know this, so la la la.
Right.
But like, it's about asking the questions and seeing and hearing the questions. So I I know that there have been times when, like, women who were had ideas were considered neurotic or had some
Mhm.
psychosis. So is neurosis and psychosis a part of what society says it is? Or is there some, actual, like, can you talk about that?
Sure. I can tell you that from a Jungian point of view, and I think this would be true of the psychoanalytic traditions, a psychosis occurs when our ego is possessed by an archetypal content, meaning that we get taken over by some idea or energy, and that's all there is. There's nothing to temper it. So psychosis,
So
Jung,
it's a closed box in a sense.
right, in a closed box with this energy bigger than anything one can ever digest, integrate, or handle. So Jung says that the difference between the psychotic and the neurotic is that the neurotic has ego defenses to defend against the unconscious archetypal energies, and the psychotic has no ego defense. They just get taken over and consumed by it. Now, from a psychoanalytic point of view, it's all on a continuum. When someone flies into a rage and they then afterwards think, oh my God, what did I just say to this person I love? Or how could I have acted that way? That we could argue is a little mini psychosis, because in that moment they're consumed by this larger than life unconscious content. When it's happening and people quickly come back to their self and can say, oh my God, what did I just do? We tend to talk about that as being caught in a complex, an unconscious feedback loop, which basically means it's something that has less energy and power. It's more humanized than this archetypal energy that's just the bigger than life, monstrous or angelic energy. New artistic creation sometimes is very much a defense against the unconscious. So what your question about when is it neurosis and when is it artistic expression? It's a good question. And what we never know from the outside, only the person expressing it knows, and maybe their therapist or analyst. I mean, so
Well,
creativity.
yeah, I mean, there's a time when it's appropriate. So I was just hearing in the news about de Klerk and Nelson Mandela, and and de Klerk said something like, any great ruler has brutal moments when they're standing up for what they're doing, and Nelson Mandela had that too. So what am I trying to say? Like, at what point are we? I don't know how to say this. Why did I bring them in? At what point is it appropriate, like in women's suffrage or fighting for rights, or I mean, when you're not being heard and it's appropriate, and when is it not? I mean, I know you can't answer, Kathleen, answer this for the world, but within myself, when is the anger, or I don't know, when is that outrage appropriate, or is it ever? Does it help?
Well, I think you're referencing perhaps in situations where people acted in that way and it did help. I'm thinking about the story of John Lewis and how he was beaten on the bridge, the crossing from Selma, and then went on to be a great congressman, working to and not responding violently. And I think
Right.
about Gandhi, who used his energy and powers to lead his people to lay down in front of the British Army instead of fighting. So I think, to answer your question, agents in our own personal and individual life and in our role in the collective, it all comes down to our relationship with our own psyche and larger self. And whether or not my creative expression is an act of defense against my own unconscious, or it's an extension of something that I have experienced deeply in my unconscious that I want to share, I don't know that it's ever pure. Because Jung says he says that every man's theory is a self-confession. Every work of art, every song you write, every word I write in my writings is a self-confession. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's out of a neurotic place, but it also can be. And when we act out of our anger and we are brutal, we all have to realize these unconscious archetypal energies, destruction, creation, they're a part of the human psyche. And when we are following the guidance and we are working to live consciously in relationship to that energy in us, then we may have moments of being archetypally possessed that If we stayed in it for long periods of time and acted out towards other people, we would be psychotic, i.e., Hitler. But we may
Okay.
have moments of it where we use that anger or outrage, but it doesn't mean we go mad, that we actually become psychotic. So it's a very individual thing. We can't just say across the board. But what I can say across the board, and I was rereading Jung this morning, is within our psyche, within the reality of who we are, there are these energetic motifs that we experience as emotions and images that are psychic organs, just like our stomach and our spleen and our heart. And these archetypes, that is what he called them, these psychic organs are in all of us. So again, we all have basic emotions and affects we have to learn to humanize, to be in relationship to, and use in ways that are for our highest good and the highest good of those around us, versus getting caught in them unconsciously and doing things that are ultimately destructive in our life and other people's lives.
So as you speak about this, and as you speak about this process, we're talking about garbage and gratefulness. Um, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about being a child and having a tantrum and not knowing how to. All I could do was get through it, and and then as an adult, being able to even start to identify when that feeling of
Mm-hmm.
helplessness and fear that leads to outrage and
Mm-hmm.
displays of great loudness, um which is interesting because when I get to sing things, it's a display of great loudness that's fun. And singing a song like the Garbage Man and hearing the garbage cans played as musical instruments and having it be loud and wonderful, there's something very satisfying to me about that. And there's something very satisfying to me as an artist about thinking that the sounds of the garbage truck are music in some way, and how would that actually be played out with a symphony orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
but but going back to me, my gratefulness, my garbage in me, emotionally and psychically or spiritually, um there's something about space. There's something about taking that space when I get helpless and hopeless and afraid. It it almost immediately leads to anger,
Mm-hmm.
which it it activates me, but it does not connect me with others. It's not that kind of expression.
Right.
It may it may spew out some of my garbage so I don't have it in me and I'm like, I feel better, but it spews it all over somebody else.
Right. That's right.
And so, but I don't want to swallow it.
Yes, but I think what you have to do is back up and realize that the hopelessness, the helplessness that you are feeling really is not the present day reality. It is a historical reality for all of us
Mm.
from when we were in utero and an infant child. But when we get caught in feelings as adults of hopelessness and helplessness and absolute dependency, we are reliving a historical experience, because that is not the reality for any of us. We can get ourselves up and take ourselves to the bathroom when we need to go. We can go to the kitchen, get food. We have resources to tend our basic needs, and that is also true emotionally. So the
But
problem's not the right word.
I just want to say there's different we's. I mean, like, I just mean you and I for sure. There are definitely people who don't have that option.
Well, they have it internally, but they
Aha.
may not have access to it consciously.
Hmm.
That thus the importance of therapy or analysis or 12-step work. We all have these abilities internally,
Okay,
but
I'm
we may
sorry,
not have access to
my
it.
brain is going to like people who are in no, I'm like people who are in slavery or people who are in. I mean, I know that's not what this conversation is about, and I know
Right.
what we're talking about, but I'm always aware of that. So I know that we're talking within this context of you, me. Um,
Yeah, I'm having a poem by Clarissa. It's Pinkola Estes coming to mind. Uh, Refuse to fall down, and if you refuse to fall down, and if you wait a minute, refuse to be. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna see if I can call it up. Basically, it says maybe you cannot refuse to be pushed down.
right.
Maybe you cannot refuse to fall down. But no one can stop you from lifting your hearts to the heavens and asking that your hungry heart be filled. You can be pushed down, you can be kept down, but no one can keep you from lifting your heart, your hungry heart to the heavens. And so she is of an indigenous background. And so she wrote these beautiful words. And I think this is what you're talking about are sociological and economic issues, which are real.
Yeah.
And they're just as real as my helplessness in the face of the ocean of plastic water bottles, you know, that
Yeah.
mile and a half that they say is in the middle in this one place in the ocean. But what I can do is not buy plastic water bottles. What I can do is say, wow, that person just was inappropriate and ugly to me. So how do I want to respond? You know, I can make those and those decisions to the degree that I understand that if some of my primitive emotions have gotten triggered, that it's not that person's job to take care of my primitive emotions. It's not that other person's job.
Yeah, I see, and I see how you're saying that, and this is really interesting because we talked about this before. We talked about being able to identify what's garbage you need to get rid of, what's
Mm-hmm.
garbage you want to recycle, what's garbage you may want to resource or turn into something else. And I'm realizing that when we do see somebody responding, they're responding to that, in a more primal or however you
Mm-hmm.
would call it way, that we can react like boom. I mean, and in improvisation, that's great. You want to react, you want to respond, you want to respond to what the other person gave you, you want to go over to
Right.
their side. But if someone's out of control, and you can either take umbrage at it, or you can understand that this person is afraid.
Yeah.
And how can you create space? So I think what I'm looking for is this idea of whether it is in someone else or whether it is in ourselves when that thing is happening, that if we can stop. I mean, this is just
Mm-hmm.
me, because I grew up around that, and and I've expressed it and experienced it in my life.
Right.
And if I can stop for one split second, and I can eat love anything, anything about that person, and anything about me, or whether the person is me.
Right.
So if I can find something to love, and I think this is what gratefulness is, but it's easier for me
Mm-hmm.
to think about find something to love in this moment. That's and I think that's also what that song is about, is it it was expressing the joyfulness of something to love that we don't usually get to love.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about what you're saying about when we can realize the other person that we may feel such anger at in the moment wants the same thing we basically want, which is human connection.
Mm,
We
mhm,
all want the same thing.
mhm.
It may look differently in a situation, but what we all ultimately, our basic needs, you know, if we go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physical needs, safety needs, love and belonging, self-esteem,
Mhm,
self-actualization.
mhm, mhm.
So if we can stop long enough and remember, wow, I'm feeling afraid. I wonder if they're feeling afraid. wow, maybe they're feeling dissed. I'm feeling dissed. Maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling dissed. You know, then we can begin to step back and check in with ourselves to see where are we. You know, in the song, I want to go back to the slight delay when you're behind the garbage truck,
Right.
and you say he gets in the way and there's a slight delay. Part of, I think, living what we're talking about with gratitude and looking to see how do I want to repurpose this energy, my anger, my fear, my desire, does mean that we appreciate the symbolic things that slow us down. And that, as you said, we take the space to check in and say, wow, thank you for this delay. This is one of the things people, send emails and then they regret it. We need a
Right.
delay, that we take the delay to say, how might this plastic bag be used? Or, where would this banana peel be better? So, what is this anger telling me? Wow, oh gosh, it's really aggression for me to go back and clarify and say, I value what you're doing. It's a great idea. I want to be a part of this. And this is what I'm needing. Can we meet there? Or I'm hearing, you can't meet me here, and this is my bottom line and what I need.
Right.
But I see your perspective. Repurposing that energy.
I'm going to pull up something that Andra said,
Yeah.
because I think it's a perfect example of actually turning that around. So she says, once I was
Yeah.
in line behind a woman who was about to explode with anger and impatience. She looked at me and I just took a deep breath and smiled, and she mirrored me. Then we were both smiling. And what I'm hearing in what Andra says is, first of all, she acknowledged without judgment. In that one little thing that she did, she expressed solidarity. I know how you feel. And she didn't say, maybe you should take a deep breath.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And
She,
this is one of those beautiful, Andres giving us an example of this beautiful psychological dynamic, and it's a biological and dynamic of what's called attunement or entrainment. That if we hold a certain state of consciousness and we're there, it invites people around us to come into that state of consciousness. So your deep breath and smile sent out energy waves, if we had the equipment to measure it, that invited her to shift to that state. And in this case, she did. And this is often the key to how to navigate in life with people who are explosive and people who we feel like are coming after us for something, or where miscommunication is starting to happen. If we can go back to what is our true north, what is the state of consciousness that we want to hold to move in the direction we want to move?
It's interesting because as you're saying the word attunement, I know that, the 11th step of the 12th of steps is all about attunement, about through prayer and meditation, or, whatever, you're attuning, which is really interesting because I was just saying that in music, in improvisation, you kind of want to bounce off what somebody said, but that's not necessarily in attunement with the deeper sense of who they are and the deepest sense of who I am. And what I really love about what Andra wrote is that, instead of bouncing off this woman, she connected to what she shared. She shared what she needed to do, and in not a bossy or what somebody else should do. She literally just shared that moment with someone.
Right. Yeah.
And that
So
allowed,
I want to,
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to take this back to the idea of forgiveness. And that I think part of what happens when we extend forgiveness to ourselves or someone else is we actually come into attunement via feeling gratitude for life and the realities of life and all that it throws at us. When we forgive ourselves and forgive another, we are extending compassion, And compassion and open-heartedness very much are the children of gratitude.
Can you just say those things again? Because I was taking everything you said and I was applying them to a situation in my life, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, so." And I know
Yeah.
it's time for us to end, but I would love to end with what you're talking about compassion and how to bring it into our lives and how to share it with others and how to let it open up our lives.
Yeah, when we forgive, in order to forgive, really forgive, we have to be experiencing some sense of appreciation and identification and understanding of the other person's side or that other part of ourself. And in that moment of forgiving, compassion is there, and there's an open-heartedness that is there that very much is the children of gratitude for this experience of life, and that we're all in it together. We all struggle with the same things. It may look differently on the surface, but we all have the same basic struggles. Again, it can look very different on the surface, and in the environment can make it, different nuances of it. But the human experience in terms of emotions and our psychic is very constant across the board, just like our physical organs. It doesn't vary according to where we're born or the status we're in or our living. It's the same. And when we understand that, then we can begin to have a sense of, and I want to just say, I imagine Andrea in that moment wasn't feeling judgmental of this woman about to explode in anger, but probably was realizing, wow, I've done this too, or I can identify with this. And so you in the moment went to what helps you shift. And when you wrote the Garbage Man song and said, he takes my garbage and I'm free.
Right.
And there's a slight delay, and that's okay. And that, there is this reality of what we don't deal with comes back.
Right. That's right. What we don't dissolve or resolve
Comes back.
is sitting there. Right.
And
Okay.
forgiveness dissolves it. And we can't forgive until we have gratitude that this is an experience I had, and this is what it helped me learn about my humanness.
Well, I have a gazillion questions that I know we can't go into now. So maybe for a next time, navigating the balance of forgiveness without caving on what it is that is important to us.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk about that next week with
Yeah.
Thanksgiving coming up, of how do we
Right.
be thankful and realize that gratitude and Thanksgiving doesn't mean that we're going to dismiss things that need to be changed, or that we're going to not stand with ourselves and what we need. They're not, they get mixed up, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a way to have compassion for both ourselves and another, which in music would be like being able to play and listen at the same time.
Yeah, and to have gratitude and compassion for ourselves and another is what ultimately allows us to set needed boundaries and take action, even if it's to end a relationship, but to do it in a way that is compassionate and respectful of the other person's humanity and experience as well as your own. It's not either or, it's both and.
Well, I love that, and it feels like a cliffhanger because that
Okay.
seems and wonderful. So, Kathleen, thank you so much, and thank you, Andra, and everybody else who is here. It's wonderful. Love it when you can see, how important your part of the conversation is and where it brings us. And Kathleen, thank you so much. I love these conversations. I love, as I always have from the first time I spoke to you, I love being able to continue this conversation.
Me too.
Great.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.